Hey everybody, welcome to our YouTube channel, The Courage to Teach Differently. My name is Vanessa and I am here in our Rekla Learning Studios to talk to you today about descriptive feedback. So this is one of our assessment series topics, giving feedback, right? We want to provide our students with feedback so that they can continue learning and improve. And today we're going to discuss this topic in aligning with Finnish pedagogy and student-centered classrooms. So teachers will often say, I have no trouble giving feedback. I want to help my students. I understand that's important, but how do I do it without creating pressure, right? We want students to improve, to understand where they're making mistakes, but how do we do that without creating stress or anxiety with our students? The tension between supporting learning and avoiding pressure is real because traditional approaches often miss the mark. Many well-intentioned feedback practices can actually hinder learning rather than support it when we rely on general praise or offer corrections that shut down thinking or stay silent out of uncertainty as to what to say. We leave students without the guidance they need to understand their own learning process. Common concerns that teachers have that have shared with me is praise doesn't always help learning. Correction can shut down thinking. Silence is unclear to students, and finding the right words can be difficult. So let's look at assessment as noticing. In Finnish-aligned classrooms, feedback isn't about judging. It's about naming learning as it happens. Remember, in Finnish pedagogy, we're talking about continuous feedback, continuous assessment. So this isn't something that we do for a quiz or an exam. We're not waiting till the end of the lesson to support the learners. We are working with them as they are going through the process. This fundamental shift reframes assessment from something done to students into something that happens with them. This is a conversation that you have with your students back and forth. So feedback captures what students are doing and thinking in the moment when we are describing learning. When we name strategies, it identifies the thinking process and approaches that students are using so they can begin to see, oh, this is what I'm doing. They're connecting those dots, right? And it preserves ownership. Students retain agency over their learning journey and their decisions. Assessment becomes part of learning, not something added afterwards. We're not waiting till the end of the lesson. We're doing this throughout the lesson. Or assessment is not separate from the experience. So what is descriptive feedback and what isn't it? We're not removing feedback, we're transforming what we choose to name and how we communicate with learners. So this is a mindset shift in our language, how we are changing what we are saying. Understanding this distinction helps teachers make intentional choices with their language. So descriptive feedback is specific. It names concrete actions, strategies, or thinking visible in student work. It's observational, so it describes what you notice without adding judgment or evaluation. And it is process focused. We're not looking at the end product. We're looking at how they got there, highlighting how students approach the work, not just the final product. So what descriptive feedback is not, it's not praise. We're not saying, great job, excellent work, because that doesn't tell the student where they did a good job. It doesn't tell them why they did a good job. They just know they did, but they cannot repeat that process next time. And so they'll have anxiety. Oh, how do I do this again? I want the teacher to be happy. how do I do this again? But I have no specifics. I have no way of knowing exactly what I did well, so they don't know how to repeat it. Judgment, nope, that's wrong, or it's a weak answer, shuts down thinking instead of opening it up, right? We want the students to feel empowered, not discouraged. And direction, fix this, try again. Those are not directional, right? It removes the ownership from the student. So a strategy that you can try that uses this new descriptive feedback concept is called I notice, I wonder. This is a simple process, but yet it's very powerful because it changes the entire tone of your feedback conversation by naming what you observe and inviting reflection. You keep thinking with the student rather than directing it for them. So you can say something like, I notice you tried 2 different strategies. I notice you organized your ideas before writing. Then you can add an I wonder. I wonder invites reflection and keeps ownership with the student. So I wonder, what made you change your answer, right? So you're putting the ownership, you're putting the power in the student's lap to think about what they did and why. Second strategy is to describe the learning process. When we describe the process that students use, they begin to understand what actually matters in learning. It helps them to focus on how to share what they know in a strategic way. So process-focused feedback helps students recognize their own strategies, understand their decisions, and value revision as part of learning. Strategies used. So you checked your answer using another method to verify your thinking, right? This is something you can say to them. I noticed you checked your answer using another method to verify your thinking. Decision making. I noticed you chose to start with the simpler part of the problem first. Then you can add, I wonder, right? Or revisions attempted. So it looks like you explained your thinking in words before writing the equation, right? So you're talking with the student about the process. You noticed how they did it. You noticed the process, their thinking. You helped them to make thinking visible, which goes along with one of my other videos about making thinking visible with the students. So I just want to share a brief example of how this conversation might go. I'm going to start with grade 1 because you can use descriptive feedback at all grade levels. So I'm going to share with you just briefly from grade 1. So the teacher might say, I noticed you lined up your counters before you started counting. The student might answer, so I wouldn't miss any. The teacher responds, that makes sense. I also noticed you counted them one by one instead of guessing. The student says, I counted again to check, right? And then the teacher responds, you checked your work by counting twice. That tells me you're thinking carefully about your answer, right? So we've identified to the student what is important in this process. Being careful with your answers so they understand now next time they can repeat this process and know that they're doing something to please the teacher, to get the right answer, to understand the process. The feedback names the organizational strategy and the checking process. Both are important mathematical practices that extend far beyond just this single problem, right? So we're building a foundational understanding of how to think through a problem with the students. And in grade 1, this is very important because when you get to algebra and high school calculus and those things, you want to have some of these basic principles already embedded in the students' mindset so that they can do the more complex math. Okay, let's look at an example from grade 7, English class. The teacher says, I notice you added a sentence here to explain why the character made that choice. The student says, I thought it wasn't clear before. The teacher notices, I also noticed you used a quote, but then explained it in your own words. The student, yes, I didn't want to just drop it in. The student answers, that tells me you're thinking about how your evidence connects to your idea. What made you decide to revise this part? Right? So again, we're working with the thinking process. This feedback focuses on the students' deliberate choices about integrating evidence, revealing their understanding of how strong writing works, right? So all of this supports the students' understanding of what they have just done so they can repeat what they are doing. It is clear to them how they are making progress. The process is making sense to them. They're connecting the dots. How this differs from grade 1. So the language becomes more sophisticated for the older students, but the purpose is still the same. We're still describing the thinking, we're naming the revision choices, and we're highlighting how the student is making connections in their work. Descriptive feedback grows alongside the student. It doesn't disappear as they mature. While the complexity and the sophistication evolve, the fundamental principles of student-centered observational feedback remain constant across all grade levels. So what changes? The language complexity, vocabulary, sentence structure can be more sophisticated. Obviously, the older they get, the more we'll discuss abstract thinking, so concepts and connections that are more nuanced and layered. And third, the length of the dialogue. So the discussion can go deeper and can extend into longer interactions. What stays the same? It's still student-centered. The learner remains in control of their learning process. So they have student ownership. The teacher is focused on the student. And we are continuing to describe their thinking, making thinking visible. Why descriptive feedback supports deep learning. This is also in reference to a video I did last week on creating deeper learning. Students develop their identity as learners based on what we notice and name in their work. So from very beginning, pre-kindergarten, all the way up to 12th grade and beyond, right? The identity of the student, how they feel about themselves, how they think about themselves as a learner, is often based on the feedback that they receive. Descriptive feedback fundamentally changes how students see themselves, their capabilities, and their relationship with learning itself. So what we want to do with descriptive feedback, we want to build confidence without dependency. We want students to trust their own judgment rather than relying on external validation, that grade, right? We don't want them focused on that grade. We want them focused on the learning process and building confidence in how they get to the grade. We want to encourage revision. Revision is a hard one. I know so many students that they write a paper and then we send it back to them and they're like, oh, I have to revise it again, right? And they feel this as a defeating, sort of frustrating process. But with descriptive feedback, we can create information for improvement with the students. And they connect those dots. They come up with ways to improve what they have. So it's not a judgment when we're giving descriptive feedback. It's an encouragement to think deeper. And it supports true independence. Learners develop internal strategies and self-assessments to help them continue their learning. And of course, it reduces anxiety. It reduces pressure. It helps learners feel safer when they receive feedback. And it reduces the judgment that they feel. So just as a conclusion, let's review briefly how to start. We want to start small. You don't need to transform everything about your practice overnight. Meaningful change often begins with the smallest, most intentional shifts, and it will take time for the students to begin to think critically, to begin to understand that it is their responsibility to think deeply about their learning. Those things, when they're used to that traditional external of assessment, they're just sitting idly waiting to be judged. And this takes time for them to realize, oh, I get to control how this works. I get to improve my writing the way I want to improve it, right? So they take ownership of that. And that takes time. So give this time. Don't give it up too quickly. Choose one approach today, practice it consistently, and notice what happens. So you can choose the I notice, I wonder. That's a very simple interaction that you can choose. You can also work on describing what you see, naming the strategy that they're using, or the decision, or the thinking that you're observing. And then, of course, making sure to take some time to pause and listen. Allow the students space to reflect and respond to your observations. Again, this is going to take time for them to really begin to think critically about their work and themselves, and not critically as in criticizing, but critical as in looking at the process and seeing where the gaps are, or where they can expand, or where they can improve. So what we choose to name in our feedback definitely shapes how students see themselves as learners. I will be posting a blog in addition to this video to support descriptive feedback. So if you want some more strategies, you want to learn about more descriptive feedback strategies, I will include several others in the blog. So I hope to see you on my blog. I hope to see you on my website, www.reclalearningstudios.com. And I hope to have a global conversation with you. So please do share your experiences in the classroom with me. Add comments to my video. Let me know what your thoughts are. Thanks for coming.